Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Johnson. I'm the president of MassMEDIC, and I am thrilled to welcome you today to our webinar, Using Advocacy to Elevate the Medtech Industry and What It Means for You. As president of the trade association, advocacy is something that I work on every day, and I think oftentimes it is something that doesn't get enough attention, and we're excited to bring to you today some color around how we use advocacy, and hopefully you will also see how advocacy can work in your business. Before we begin, we'll do a couple just housekeeping words here. All our webinars are recorded, and we will be distributing both slides and also some follow-up materials after the call. We will have a time for Q&A, and you can put your questions in the Q&A tab on your screen. You just you can add those at any time during the presentation, and we will be able to answer them once we kick this over. We hope for a robust discussion on Q&A. Our presentation is not going to be super long, but there's going to be a lot of information coming at you. So feel free to ask questions, and no question is too small. So we'll make sure that we do our best. So why don't we move on to the next slide? And as we kind of look at this world that we're talking about, we're really excited to have some very strong speakers with us today. Of course, you see me, I've already introduced myself, Brian. With us today is Mr. Paul Seltman. He's the Senior Vice President of Global Public Policy and Government Affairs at Smith & Nephew. He's also a member of the MassMEDIC board. We have Anthony DeMeo. He is the Vice President of ML Strategies. He is in charge of he's our man in DC, as we call him. He is very knowledgeable on all things related to federal policy. And then we have Julie Schrei from Schrei Solutions. She works with us on our Good Government Fund and makes sure that we are utilizing all the tools in our toolbox. So let's move into the presentation today. Advocacy at MassMEDIC is really, it's part of our DNA. We're actually the result. This organization is the result of a public-private partnership that began way back in 1991. We were actually spun out of something called the Medtech Collaborative, which is now referred to as Medtech. We were spun out as an independent organization in 1996, but MassMEDIC is the result of a working group that was convened by then Governor Paul Cellucci, as well as the company Genzyme and companies like Smith & Nephew, who were sort of operating in plain sight here in Massachusetts. At the time that MassMEDIC was created, Massachusetts was coming off of the loss of the mainframe computing industry and the downfall of Wang computers, and what was the tech belt in Route 128 in the 90s. The governor, and this was in the heart of the recession in the early 1990s, was really focused on how Massachusetts wins the future and doesn't squander these opportunities again. So they convened a series of working groups led by MassTech, and discovered that lo and behold, there were about 500-600 medical device companies in the state that were kind of hiding as plastics manufacturers. And this trade association was created 28 years ago to really give this industry a voice and shape it and define it for not only public, not only for our public leaders, but also to make sure that this community was networked and engaged. This is I've looked at a lot of the background around this creation, and it's really quite brilliant policy. They learned from the mistakes that the mainframe computing industry did in losing that technological advantage to Silicon Valley, and realized that if industries aren't connected and not talking, and people aren't sharing information, and they're not talking to their government leaders in a coordinated way, then you can lose these massive industries. And so we are the direct result of that. And this has been a public-private partnership that has lasted for almost 3 decades. We're coming up on our 30-year anniversary. And really our mission is just to energize our diverse ecosystem of innovators and change healthcare through technology, and while establishing Massachusetts and continuing to be a global leader in health technology and life sciences. And we're really, we live that mission every day. And just to kind of illustrate this, I want to show you a picture of where we were 28 years ago versus where we are today. On the left is Senator Ted Kennedy, who spoke at the first MassMEDIC meeting, was instrumental in helping this organization get off the ground. And then to the right, you can see our now Governor Maura Healey, who just this week has announced a third reauthorization of the Massachusetts Life Sciences Bill for another 10 years, continuing a great tradition of life sciences in Massachusetts. One thing that I look at that picture on the left that always gives me pause is this is 1996, and I was a senior in college. So I quickly use this to carbon date myself, and it does look a little grainy, but I love this picture because I think it really encapsulates the tradition of MassMEDIC and then how far we've come. So we've been partners with government in Massachusetts for 3 decades, making sure that the medical device industry has a voice. So we'll move on to the next slide. I want to talk to you today about a little bit of our recent advocacy efforts and some wins that we've had. And I want to kind of describe to you what a win is in advocacy terms, because I think, as we look at the life sciences reauthorization, one thing that always comes into my mind is there's always this question of when is mission accomplished? When does mission accomplished happen? Mission accomplished is an evolution that never happens in life sciences, and it probably never really happens in advocacy. You are always, if you're doing this well, you are always moving the ball forward and trying to make sure that you're not getting caught from behind. Massachusetts, as a global leader in life sciences, is an essential part of the national medical device world. We are a top 3 market in both 510(k) clearances, PMAs, SBIR funding, and also companies established here, as well as total number of employees in the state that work at medical device and medical technology companies. And recently, JLL labeled us as the top medtech manufacturing market in the country, and numbered the amount of people working in manufacturing and medtech at 45,000 people, which is, I think, something that we don't quite talk about every day, is that we're not only building the developments of tomorrow, we're also building it here. Medical devices is a top exported product out of Massachusetts. So when we look at accomplishments that we've had over the past year or so, we really kind of look at it in a few buckets. One is, sort of defensive, right? What sort of onerous laws or changes in regulation were we able to keep at bay through our relationships in Congress and our relationships with congressional leaders, but also what were we able to do on offense to create new opportunities for companies. And I'm going to look at just 4 examples here of what I think are great examples of both. The first is ARPA-H. ARPA-H is it is the DARPA for healthcare. It is an initiative that came out of the Biden administration in 2021. It is a brand new federal agency designed with helping create major breakthroughs in healthcare, which will impact the largest number of people. In 2023, the agency put out a call for siting of its 3 headquarters, and then opened up a competition to see who would be able to host this. And this pitted major life sciences hubs against each other in a competition. And it was a 3-part competition where we had to write a proposal, host a pitch day, and also then finally submit a 50-page proposal on how you would construct a national healthcare network. MassMEDIC, through our work with Congress and through our work with Anthony's team at ML Strategies, identified ARPA-H almost as soon as it was in its conception level. So we were ready for this when it came. And when the proposal was floated, MassMEDIC, along with our partners in government and hospital, a very small group of trade associations connected to life sciences and hospitals, and a couple major research institutions, worked together for 6 months on this project to make sure that we won that proposal. And as a result, ARPA-H's Investor Catalyst Hub is now situated in Kendall Square, Cambridge. And just last week, First Lady Jill Biden came up to announce a $100 million women's health initiative that will be flowing through ARPA-H's Investor Catalyst Hub here in Cambridge. This is a huge win for the ecosystem for many reasons, but I think one of the most important aspects is that we were, because we've been active on advocacy, we were able to marshal our resources in both government and our partners in research to come together and work as a team. And I think that those collaborations continue to operate today, and we continue to make sure that ARPA-H will be well funded and that it will be part of Massachusetts for many, many years to come. In the last couple of years, that's a win on offense. Defense, let's look at some defense here. Coming out of the pandemic, shortage reporting for the medical device and pharmaceutical industry has been top of mind for the FDA. They were in the reauthorization of the Medical Device User Fee Act, which is a natural point of negotiation for what FDA can regulate with industry. The FDA was very, very aggressively seeking mandatory shortage reporting for medical device companies, and we were part of a coalition that helped beat that back a little bit, make sure that this vehicle did not include shortage reporting, and that was a direct result of advocacy. Now, as you'll see in the coming slides, this is an issue that we're going to have to continuously work on. But you have to look, in terms of advocacy, you have to look at the avenues by which large changes can come through. And so this was a lens where we were able to shut that door. There'll be other doors where shortage reporting surfaces, but I can assure you that we are continuously watching this. And the breakthrough bill, which is another offense move. So this is part of the TSET, MSIT, FDA, CMS breakthrough pathway to provide some standard reimbursement or initial reimbursement for truly breakthrough technologies. This has been a goal of industry for a long time, because we have some issues with reimbursement that make it difficult for novel medical devices to really come in and change healthcare. The breakthrough bill that is currently in Congress, it is not a perfect bill, and we know that, but it is a good first step into starting to level the playing field for medical device companies. And through we were able to use our advocacy to help get that bill pushed through the Energy and Commerce Committee on a bipartisan basis, because we have been working with our friend Lori Trahan, our congresswoman up in Lowell, to make sure that she understands the needs of her constituency. Her district has probably one of the most densely populated in terms of medical devices, and it is through this constant dialogue about what our industry needs that she knew that when it was time to push something forward that could help this industry, and she took a bold step there to help get that bill through the Energy and Commerce Committee. Now, it's not passed yet, and we're still working on it. And as I said, the bill's not perfect. Still a long ways to go, but I think that step was really important. And we're hopeful that as this evolves, we can start to make a dent in some of these reimbursement challenges. And then I finally talked a little bit about this earlier. the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center reauthorization. This was an initiative launched back in 2006, 2007 by Governor Deval Patrick to really turn Massachusetts into the global leader in life sciences. And it was uh, a revolutionary investment in this industry of $1 billion that was to last for 10 years. Well, that was reauthorized in 2018 for 5 years and at half the price tag. And we, in working with Governor Healy, even as early as her running for governor, and working with her as when she was Attorney General, MassMEDIC specifically, we have been working with her for several years since the COVID pandemic to help her understand how important this industry is and how critical it was that when this bill came up for reauthorization, that we went for a full 10 years and that we went bold and big. And we have she just announced this week, and this will be official this week with the filing of the Economic Development Bill, a 10-year reauthorization on the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. And so I think those are really great examples of of how advocacy works in action. I will just say that as I turn the ball over to Mr. Selman, one of the things that I think is really important for people to understand is that you have to have defensive advocacy and you have to have some offensive advocacy. You also have to understand the pathways by which change come. And then one of the things that makes Massachusetts truly unique is not just our technological advantage or our talent advantage, which we certainly have. We have an exceptional federal delegation and a state delegation. Our partners in Congress are extremely influential in the body politic. They have leadership positions. They are strategic about how they achieve leadership positions, and they almost always have a position on the key committees that we need in order to affect change. On our stateside level, you don't invest more $2 billion in the life sciences without full-throated cooperation from our state delegation. Our state delegation invested this money during the recession, the Great Recession. They reinvested, and now they're going to reinvest a third time. So we have great partners in both the state and federal side. And what our job is to do is to help not only our community engage with them, but also help your companies engage on a one-by-one basis. And so, we're going to hand it over. I'm going to hand it over to Paul and talk a little bit about some of the things that we're working on right now. But I want you to kind of think about that as we go through this webinar and think about how your company looks at its engagement with your state and federal lawmakers and where you can use this to your advantage. Because I think it's a tool that a lot of companies don't understand and they don't use, or they're intimidated by the approaching your elected officials. But I would strongly consider you, as we go through this, to think about ways and then engage with us, and we can help you. We can help you do that, because not every company has a man as brilliant as Paul Seltman working on their government affairs. And I think not to set you up too much, Paul, but why don't you take the group through some of this current initiatives that we're working on?
Yeah, let me just thank you, Brian, for the overly kind introduction. But just to kind of double down a little bit on what Brian was just talking about, once upon a time I was at a law firm and I was a lobbyist who had various clients, as Anthony does now, and I used to impress upon smaller companies that they can engage in government affairs, and you don't necessarily have to have an internal government affairs department to engage externally. Sometimes it does help to have a consultant, but if you have a trade association, you can go, introduce yourself to, say, the offices on Capitol Hill or at the state level in Massachusetts who do represent your facilities at a minimum, so that they know you are there and so that they have an understanding of not only the high quality products that you make, but also the high quality jobs that you provide to people who live there. So you do not need to be a huge company to engage and to make a difference, because we all need to be rowing together within this Massachusetts ecosystem. So in terms of moving into some of these issues that we're currently working on, and Brian already touched on two of the three, let me start there. Let me start with shortage reporting. So if you go back to the pandemic, that's where this starts, where in particular, nobody had ever heard the acronym PPE before. And then we all woke up one morning and we all knew that was things like masks and eyewear protection. And maybe it was a gown. It all comes under, personal protective equipment. And a lot of this stuff is commodity stuff that was being manufactured overseas, a lot of it in China, and all of a sudden we couldn't get enough here to the US fast enough. And in the pharmaceutical world, there already are shortage reporting requirements that are across the board that we did not have in the device world. And some of that is because, when you're in pharmaceutical land, there are unique molecules. And if you can't, and a drug will have a unique molecule in it. And if you can't get that drug, then you can't get that treatment. And in the device world, there's a lot of competition. Our products are not always unique. And things like PPE are commodity products. And typically there's not an issue with supply or shortages, but for that unique pandemic situation that we had. But what FDA did was they kind of started talking as if we had a shortage problem across all medical devices. And what they had wanted to do was institute new rules around shortage reporting, except they didn't have the authority to do sweeping rules like that on their own without consent from Congress. And so with appropriate advocacy from our industry, FDA and Congress narrowed what they were asking for. Congress then gave FDA authority to require shortage reporting, but just for products that related to the pandemic, things like PPE or respirators, not everything. Unfortunately, FDA has not really dropped their agenda of wanting shortage reporting for all medical devices. And there have been, some of the proposals have been quite extreme from an industry perspective, in that, you have the potential, as they look at things by SKU, you have the potential to have to say report something as a shortage if you have had to stop manufacturing just one version of 4 different versions of a product that you make, and have the additional requirement of having to provide FDA with information on what other manufacturers make that product and volume availability and things like that. So I think that, where FDA wants to go with this is too far. Certainly the device industry has been comfortable with the concept of shortage reporting in the context of a pandemic for products needed for that pandemic. But otherwise, there is voluntary reporting that we have to do when there is a true shortage. And certainly I think industry has been meeting that standard. But as early as as recently as last week, there was a key FDA official who was quoted at a conference talking about how manufacturers are reverting to quote unquote old business practices that could jeopardize medical device supply chain. So the implication is that somehow we hadn't learned the lessons of the pandemic, that we were shifting production back overseas in some of these key areas, or going back to single source suppliers for things. And from where I sit, that's not what I see happening. I see companies having diversified their supply chains and are not reverting, but I don't know where they're getting their information from. But clearly, as an industry, we have to maintain this dialogue with FDA, because if they're saying those things publicly, that is not helpful. Congress reads those comments and then wants to take legislative action. And so any kind of healthcare bills that are coming up, whether it's the appropriations bills in a few weeks, or whether when we move in the next year and there's bigger healthcare legislation, which I'll talk about later, we have to remain vigilant on this issue. Brian also talked about TSET, or the Breakthrough Therapies Bill. The congressional legislation that the industry has worked on, that Brian talked about, it is great because that keeps pressure on the Biden administration to take action on this critical reimbursement issue. The Biden administration can act on its own and has a proposal out there, and they took comments. We are waiting for them to finalize. Not sure when they will. It's unclear. There is AdvaMed recently had a letter sent over to the administration asking them to please hurry up. Basically, we just don't know that they are going to push out a final version anytime soon. So the legislation keeps up that pressure. This is an important issue. It's also actually, it's not so much a breakthrough issue, but just in general, finding a reimbursement pathway for pediatric products is also an issue. And part of the problem is that often when you have a pediatric product, or a product that's really only used in kids, Medicare won't set a national payment rate, and then all the states at the Medicaid level have to do the spade work themselves on trying to set that rate and never get around to it. So it's a secondary issue, but it's another example of a reimbursement challenge. And certainly in the area of pediatrics, that is one of those areas where a lot of providers would like to see more innovation, but it's hard for companies to innovate if they're uncertain as to how they will get paid after they've made the investment. And so that is the same issue as the TSET issue on the Medicare side of things. So those are the two issues we continue to work on that Brian also mentioned. And then the third one, which is huge and is imminent, is ethylene oxide regulation. The EPA any day now is about to come out with at least one regulation related to ethylene oxide and its impact on air quality. There is a second regulation they are also working on, actually on the actual ethylene oxide itself and its impact on workers and people working at the facility internally, as opposed to the air quality. But both regulations impact facilities, which means there could be a constriction of supply of sterilization, which then would impact the availability of medtech products. And that's because half of all medical devices are sterilized with ethylene oxide. And for the most part, there is not a readily available alternative at this point in time for that half of all medical products. And so as an industry, what we've been doing is trying to make sure that FDA has a significant voice at the table, because FDA is very concerned about the direction EPA is moving here. FDA has been weighing in with EPA, but what we don't really know is how effective that voice has been. There also is an amendment in a House bill that is moving that essentially funds EPA, that basically says that EPA cannot implement these regulations until FDA certifies there would be no impact on availability of medical devices for patients. Now, that is not law yet. It might not become law, but it definitely has had an effect on the debate in Congress, which is helpful. So these are things we're all continuing to work on, will continue to be relevant in the months ahead. EPA should come out with the clean air portion of that regulation it has to be signed by law by March 1, which is just a few days away, but we may not see the actual regulation text until sometime next week, so stay tuned there. And I'm going to hand it over to Anthony.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, we'll go to my next slide here to kind of just give an overview of the sort of the mechanics of advocacy and engagement with MassMEDIC. I have had the great fortune of working in the industry now for over a decade with MassMEDIC members and other manufacturers. And for the past 4 years, I've also worked with MassMEDIC directly, and that's been truly the privilege of a lifetime. It's come a long way, I think, even in 4 years. We were, when I came on, we were sort of staring down the barrel of the pandemic, and then almost overnight, it was just almost an overwhelming amount of work to stay ahead of the public health needs and to contribute to the public health policy conversation, and make sure that the Congress was being thoughtful in what they in how they were addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's, it was a hard time to sort of build a system just because of all the substantive work that needed to be done. As Paul knows, we passed more legislation in the first half of 2020 than maybe in the 20 years that preceded it in Congress. So it was very busy. But as it leveled out, we did sort of create some good processes for MassMEDIC's advocacy that I'm pretty proud of. So I participate in the board of director meetings with a briefing and take questions. And for those that participate on the board who are on the call, I want to say thank you. And for those organizations represented on the board and not, you should know that this is a board of directors that really appreciates the importance of advocacy, and they have made a conscious decision to invest in it. And that goes from, some representing large companies that have Washington presence that have been doing this for a long time, to some that are startups or on the smaller end, or just commercializing or whatever, that are learning advocacy and see the value and want to participate to the level of everyone on the board. And I really appreciate the consensus building that goes on in the board of directors, and it really is a pleasure to work with them. So it comes from the top. So with their blessing and with their encouragement, we formed something called the DC Reps group. This is a group of lobbyists, but not exclusively lobbyists, people working for member companies of MassMEDIC that have a specific job function related to advocacy. And we meet regularly. We do it virtually and sometimes in person. And we coordinate, we share information. I run the meetings alongside Brian, and we typically have at least a couple of agenda items that we need to address and build consensus around before taking action. So whether that's a letter that we want to sign on to that the national trades are doing, which is something we handled this week, or whether it's Brian submitting testimony to a committee of jurisdiction, or being asked to provide comments by a member of Congress. We want to make sure that those regularly engaged in the flow and the conversations on the Hill put their 2 cents in, and we're able to all come to an agreement on how these communications should be formed. And often we can do that in the DC Reps group. Sometimes we actually set up ad hoc committees with volunteers who are maybe most steeped in that particular policy, or represent companies that are most impacted by that particular policy. And those ad hoc committees will go off and, with my help, formulate whatever the action item is, whether it's a comment for a docket on a proposed rule, or something to submit to a committee in advance of a hearing. And then we'll bring it back to the group for review. And I think that that's a system that that we built through trial and error, and it's working really well, and it's got great engagement. I would say on a typical monthly call of the DC Reps group, we've got 15 people representing as many companies actively participating, and it's a great place to learn. It's a great place to share information and get the inside scoop, and really make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction. On a less regular basis, we conduct legislative fly-ins wherein often the DC reps participate as well, but they're more than welcome and encouraged, in fact, to bring members from their companies, staffers from their companies from Massachusetts and New England down to Washington for a day of face-to-face meetings with members of Congress and their staff. And in fact, these fly-ins in the past have included companies that do not at all have a Washington presence or background in advocacy. And to be honest with you, some of those are the most effective people to have in these meetings, because they're really, they're steeped in the everyday of their business, whether that's operating, a production line, or they're a doctor and a chief medical officer, explaining firsthand the patient impact of the device. And it really brings a fresh perspective on our advocacy and our regular advocacy with what we would typically do annual fly-ins. So we get into sort of the groove of monthly the lobbyists tackling it, but there really is a lot of benefit to having founders and others from the state come down on our sort of big fly-in days, and those are a blast. We also, and this is what I was just mentioning, we also just are kind of reactive. Members of Congress and their committees often ask questions of me and Brian and maybe individual members of MassMEDIC. How does this thing that I'm hearing about impact you, and how should I be thinking about it? And we're happy to be a resource and a sounding board. And it didn't happen by accident. It happened because we're in front of them a lot. We've never burned them. We've always given them good information, and we're now a trusted partner. And people in positions of influence calling us to ask questions is a great place to be. And it gives us just one more opportunity to impact change that benefits the industry. So let's move on and talk about briefly what engagement's going to look like after the next election, which is coming up in November. We could advance the slide, please. So importantly, there are no departures slated for the New England delegation. There is one competitive race. We don't have a big footprint in Maine's 2nd Congressional District, but that race very well could flip from Jared Golden. We don't yet know who the opponent will be, but for the most part, we're going to see the same members of Congress that we've been building relationships with return in January. There's always turnover in staff, so there's always a need to engage with those offices. But the rapport that we've built, and I'll go through the list in a minute, with many of these members of Congress is something that is going to carry into the next Congress, and it's something that we're going to continue to use to the advantage of the organization and its members. So let's advance to just take a quick look at some of the races that are going to decide control of the Congress. We could advance to the Senate map. As you can see, the Senate is very much in play currently. It's run by the Democrats. They are really on the defensive. Those gray states don't have a race. It's the brownish ones, and I'm realizing now that the color might not be distinct enough. But Arizona, Montana, Ohio are the consensus toss-ups, and could sway control of the Senate. And if Republicans do take control of the Senate, then the Massachusetts and many of the New England senators will be in the minority. But of course, the Senate is a body that requires a strong majority to move anything. So our senior members from particularly New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island are going to continue to be key figures in the Senate, regardless of how the election shakes out. And we'll look at the House very briefly too. We could advance the slide to the House map. You'll see here that the Republicans currently control the gavel, and the House is a majority rules body. So, you know, with just one seat, you can control the committee agendas, what gets considered on the floor, and what gets passed through the chamber. So the majority is very important in the House. And as you can see on this map, there's about 24 real toss-up races. And I think, you know, this is one of those years where the Republicans are on the defense in the House. So we could see the Democrats taking committee gavels in January, in which case, again, with a very Democratic delegation in New England, will be well positioned to be driving the agenda and helping those driving the agenda formulate an agenda in January. So let's advance to some of the key figures in the Senate. You know, as MassMEDIC has grown, it has sort of expanded beyond the borders of Massachusetts. So while we're very close with figures like Elizabeth Warren, the senior senator, who's a member of the Finance Committee, which has jurisdiction over Medicare, and you know, Paul talked a bit about our reimbursement priorities, and Ed Markey, who sits on the Health Committee, which has jurisdiction over the FDA. He also mentioned some of our regulatory priorities. We've been expanding steadily and being in front of other members as well. Throughout the pandemic, we were in front of Maggie Hassan, who was on both of those committees, Jean Shaheen, who's on the Appropriations Committee, which is of course in charge of doling out the money. So you know, those are the two senators from New Hampshire, and we are developing a very good relationship with them because of the growth of the industry, particularly in the Manchester area, Portsmouth, Southern New Hampshire, kind of drawing on the expertise of the region rather than Massachusetts. Rhode Island, you know, Jack Reed's a longtime appropriator and someone we've been able to meet with. He's great open door policy there. Sheldon Whitehouse as well on finance. And of course, you know, Bernie Sanders in Vermont, less of a footprint, but he is the chairman of the Health Committee currently. So we're doing everything we can to stay close to him. We'll look at the House, kind of highlight a few members from the House delegation, because should it flip to the Democrats, we'll, as Brian teased at the beginning, have some people in key positions. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but in Massachusetts, we've got members on the rise. Richie Neal in a Democratic-led House is the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, jurisdiction over CMS and Medicare in particular, not to mention tax, Social Security, trade. Jim McGovern would once again become chairman of the Rules Committee. He's the member from Worcester. Rules determines exactly what goes to the floor and how it's debated on the floor of the House, what amendments are offered. Something a committee he's been committed to since his joining Congress in the early 90s. Catherine Clark, as many of you know from television, she's a star. She is #2 in Democratic leadership. She will be the first member of leadership in the House since from Massachusetts since Tip O'Neill. Should the Democrats take over, she'll be the majority leader. She's currently the whip. Lori Trahan, as Brian mentioned, is our member on Energy and Commerce, which is the committee of jurisdiction over the FDA. They have some other Medicaid and Medicare jurisdiction as well. And she's really our go-to substantive E&C person. And likewise, her staff is calling us all the time for our input on matters of legislation, letters, so forth, that she's asked to consider. So a great friend and champion in Lori Trahan. Obviously, we've got high concentration in other districts and members who are on the rise, including Seth Moulton and Jake Ockenklass, who we work with. I mentioned New Hampshire earlier. Annie Custer is another more senior member of Energy and Commerce, and we're in front of a lot. Chris Pappas, we've been knocking on his door for Veterans Affairs related issues, and the list goes on. So if we could just advance to what I'm going to turn over to Paul to sort of tie this all together. If depending on how those maps go in November, we're going to have different ways to deal with our priorities in January and throughout the next Congress. So Paul is going to take us through that.
No, thanks, Anthony. And I'm just going to go through this quickly and then hand it off to Julie to kind of close things out, and then we'll go to Q&A. But you know, the issues that I talked about earlier, ethylene oxide, TSET, the breakthrough legislation for Medicare, and shortage reporting, these issues are unlikely to be fully settled this year. Like, you know, like any good policy issue, it takes a long time to work through them. And part of that is it's an election year. There may not be all the right appropriate legislative vehicles to settle these things permanently. On ethylene oxide, I mentioned the EPA is putting out the air quality related part of this regulation in the next few days, but the part that regulates the actual ethylene oxide and how it's used inside the facility, impact on workers, that actually is the part that will have a greater impact probably on our products than the air quality one. Don't have a lot of time to go into the details here, but that one may not come out anytime soon. And that's why I'm saying these issues are going to go on for a while. So as you look ahead to 2025, the first year after the new president is elected, that's when there's going to be a lot of activity. And the reason I say that, there are a bunch of expiring tax and healthcare provisions that occur, a bunch of provisions in law that expire during 2025 that will force Congress to need to take action on tax and healthcare issues broadly. And so it will you're probably looking at a big bill to deal with a bunch of things that deal from everything from increasing the debt limit to personal income tax rates to corporate tax policy issues, all the way down to things like telehealth and subsidies for people under Obamacare. So they're going to be thinking probably some type of big package, and that means then that more narrow issues like shortage reporting or the breakthrough bill, that's sort of where those things end up tagging along. So just wanted to flag that for you, but that's why all of this year's work is really important. We can't wait till 2025. So all of the education and engagement is now, and then it just keeps increasing as we move into 2025. And in order to be successful in advocacy, we have to have the relationships that we need, like with all those people that Anthony just walked through. And that's really where the MassMEDIC Good Government Fund comes in. And so I'm going to hand it over to Julie to say a few words about that.
Thanks, guys. Brian, if you want to go to the next slide. So as you can see, the Good Government Fund is fairly new. It's established in 2021. I've had the privilege of working on it since the beginning and sort of building the foundations. It is a nonpartisan political action committee. I say that meaning that it's not something where we have the ability to give 50% Republican, 50% Democrat, given the massive amount of Democrats in Massachusetts and New England. But it does mean that nonpartisan party affiliation is not something that we consider when we look at candidates. As Anthony and Paul can tell you, it is a super important tool as part of our advocacy program. It gives us really a seat at the table. It gives you the ability to sort of build those relationships on a more intimate relationship, attend dinners, and really build that really strong so that when we go to them for advocacy, we've already got a strong relationship. So it is important to continue to build relationships with members moving into 2025. You can see the importance of some of these issues. But something I will say, the Good Government Fund is a corporate trade association PAC. So something really important to point out is we do have a regulation put on us by the Federal Election Commission known as prior approval. So for us to be able to sort of engage with you and give you updates on our Good Government Fund, we must first have prior approval authorization from you and your companies. So that is a form that we're going to send out with the notes and the slide presentation after this is over. I encourage you to sign it. It does not mean that you have to, or you're pledging to contribute to the Good Government Fund. It merely means that we have the ability to communicate with you and give you updates on the things that we're doing through the Good Government Fund. So I would encourage you guys to sign that, send it back, scan it, email it back. You can sign up for multiple years. But we're going to follow up with that. Also an FAQ on the Good Government Fund. It is a, again, nonpartisan political action committee. I know it's relatively new, so a lot of our folks may not know sort of the ins and outs of the PAC. So we are going to be following up with an FAQ. If you have questions about the Good Government Fund, please ask Brian. He'll direct them, you know, if he can't answer them, which he should be able to. If he can't answer them, he'll direct them to me. But it is a really important tool that we have that gives Anthony and Paul, when they go in the door, sort of that little extra oomph that they need to kind of build those relationships. So I do encourage you to sign prior approval so we can at least communicate with you about the advocacy efforts that we're doing and working on, so we can really have a strong 2025.
Thanks,
Brian,
Julie.
I'll turn it back to you. Are there any questions about the PAC? Please put them in the Q&A. We love to answer them. I'm really excited about the advocacy work that we are working on for 2024 and 2025. So I'm really excited for everyone that joined us today.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, everybody. Just a question that we get a lot is, you know, what's the best first step to engaging with your congressional delegation? And, you know, say you don't have a lot of time or resources, you know, what's the best first step, and how do you, you know, can you expect to get some member of Congress to come to your office? I mean, like, what do you, Anthony or Paul, what do you think is the best first step there?
Yeah, I mean, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I think the best first step is over the threshold into the congressional office in Washington, D.C. And I encourage every member of MassMEDIC to consider doing that. And if you need help, let us know. But, you know, these people want to hear from you. They want to know what great work you're doing. And these are easy stories to tell. It's not like we're making, you know, we're not manufacturing cigarettes, right? They want to hear about the life-saving technology and innovations that you're bringing to market, and they want to hear about the people that you're putting to work, whether it's construction crews all the way up to microbiologists and mechanical engineers. All of that is important to any member of Congress and their staff. And I think, yeah, eventually what you want to do is get them into a position to be at your facility meeting your employees, and then someday as it goes on The Godfather, you're going to need something from them, and you're going to be able to ask them for some help, and whether that's help with fighting back shortage reporting or ETO regulation, as Paul explained, or whether it's you're conducting some research with a local college, and you're whether WPI or MIT or something, and you can get some extra help from the federal government to fund that research. Those members of Congress have an ability to direct that through the appropriations process. There's all kinds of different things. We see it every day, all kinds of different things that come up. But you don't want that first interaction to be, hey, here, I need something. You want that first interaction to be, this is who I am and why you ought to care about this great constituent company. That's my opinion.
That's great. And Julie and Paul, just the question of fundraising in general is always a sticky wicket for some folks. Some folks are nervous that a political donation sort of represents a public declaration of support. Can we just talk about why fundraising is so important for members of Congress, both on the state and federal level, and why and how it kind of completes the advocacy journey?
So the answer is simple. It takes money to get elected. You have to spend money. Every candidate does to get elected, whether it's on the state, local, or federal. Some Senate races, are in the hundreds of millions of dollars that they're spending. So they must fundraise to get elected. I mean, that's the bottom line. what we're doing in MassMEDIC Good Government Fund offers your members is the ability to contribute to the PAC sort of without giving. If you do a personal contribution to a candidate, that's a little bit more of a declaration that you support that candidate. But if you give to the MassMEDIC Good Government Fund, we are nonpartisan. So it does not mean that you're doing a declaration that you support a specific candidate. It sort of allows you to be a little bit freer with what you can contribute and how you want to do that. But again, if you contribute individually to a candidate, it does get reported. And it does come across as, a specific declaration that you support that candidate. And maybe you do, and maybe that's what your company is supportive of. But MassMEDIC Good Government Fund allows you to kind of take that off and allows you to go to a nonpartisan political action committee so that you're not out there supporting one candidate.
Yeah, and I guess a follow-up would be, it doesn't take that. I mean, we hear so much about money in politics, but I don't, as far as the experience I've had with this is you actually don't need to spend a ton of money to bolster your efforts. Like, donations don't have to be, like, people don't have to think that the donation needs to be gigantic to actually support their efforts, right? I mean,
No.
I think,
No, and the Good Government Fund allows you to pool funds so that if every person gives $100, it's not just you giving $100 personally to a candidate. That does fall under the radar. It allows us to pool, and when you give a larger contribution from a larger group of people, it really speaks volumes for the industry.
the other thing that I would add is that when a congressman or congresswoman from Massachusetts receives, when they essentially receive money from their own backyard, that's more meaningful to them than when they get a random check from a random lobbying organization that's from some other part of the country. I mean, they're going to get checks like that because they sit on committees of jurisdiction over things that don't just relate to Massachusetts. But the money that comes from home is more personal in a positive way.
that's great. Yeah, and I'll say, just from experience in sort of working in this space, it is our elected officials really want to hear from our industry. We're an industry that is producing cutting edge breakthroughs, incredible patient stories. These are the stories that they want to hear about. This is the stuff that I think in their heart, many of them are here to do, which is affect change. And this industry has an exceptional ability to really illustrate issues with healthcare, also the possibilities of healthcare. So I hope you've had a chance today to just learn a little bit more about advocacy. And I think what you can see is that we are working diligently every day to make sure that we're shaping an advocacy policy that is effective, that operates on multiple fronts, and also that we have some exceptional folks working with MassMEDIC to do this. This has been a great opportunity to talk about it, but we can continue this conversation via email. We're going to send some follow-ups. Please feel free to spread the word about this. Please reach out and we can connect one-on-one and really talk about this. We need your help to make sure that our elected leaders are consistently hearing from this industry. As Paul said, 2025 is going to be an exceptionally busy year. Now is the time to really lay the groundwork for getting positive change through the Congress in the next administration. And as you can see from what Anthony said, we have a lot at stake in Massachusetts here, and support of these candidates now goes a long way, a very long way, as we move forward. I want to thank you all for your time. I want to thank the panelists, Paul, Anthony, Julie. You guys did a fantastic job. And as always, thanks to all of our terrific MassMEDIC members. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.